By the second week, Juniper Crossing had already decided who the new land buyer wanted. They were all looking at Cora Bellamy. Gideon Hart wasn't. On the morning he first rode in, Nora Bellamy was behind the counter of Bellamy Mercantile and Orchard Supply, pencil behind one ear, sorting through a shipment of cracked lamp chimneys and bent pruning hooks that had arrived 3 days late and somehow managed to be packed even worse than they were labeled. The store sat where Depot Road met Willow Street, which meant everybody passed it, and most people talked in front of it longer than they needed to. Nora did not usually stop working just because the town had found something to stare at. Her younger sister did. "Come here," Cora called from the front window. "There's a man on a bay gelding and Mrs. Pritchard is pretending not to look at him." Nora kept stacking invoices. "Then Mrs. Pritchard is having a harder morning than I am." Gideon Hart did not move like a man trying to impress strangers. He rode like somebody used to long roads and quiet weather. Broad shoulders, sun-marked face, no wasted motion. He tied his horse outside the county deed office, disappeared inside, and stayed there long enough for half the town to decide he had money, and the other half to decide he had intentions. By noon, both rumors had reached Bellamy Mercantile. The Bellamys had been keeping that store alive for 4 years, since Thomas Bellamy's fall from a wagon left his hips stiff and his days shorter than he liked to admit. Their mother had turned inward after that. Nora stepped into the empty space everything else had left behind. Inventory, accounts, supplier letters, credit disputes. The 100 practical emergencies that came with a valley built on weather and wishful planning. That afternoon, Gideon Hart walked in. He didn't start with charm. He took in the shelves once: sulfur, rope, seed sacks, hinges, lamp oil, then put his attention on Nora the way a man does when he has already figured out who can actually answer his question. "I need trellis wire," he said. "Enough for the south slope of 80 acres if I decide to set young apple stock before fall. I was told this is the only place in town that won't overcharge me." "That depends," Nora said. "Are you asking for good wire or cheap wire?" A tiny smile. "Good." "Then you were told correctly." He gave her the acreage, the gauge, the quantity, the kind of detail that said he knew what he was doing. Nora named the price, told him what she could have by Thursday, then added, "If your south slope is the Harper tract west of Miller Creek, stake your rows higher than you think you need. Cold air settles low there in April and takes the blossoms first." That was when he really looked at her. "You know that land?" "I know this valley," Nora said. "Difference." He paid the full order on the spot. Just before he reached the door, Cora came in from the storeroom carrying tea tins, sunlight catching in her hair. In Juniper Crossing, people often forgot what they had been saying when Cora entered a room. Gideon nodded to her politely. Then he left. That should have ended the matter. It didn't. He came back Thursday for the wire, the next Tuesday for sulfur wash and pruning hooks, the Tuesday after that for fence staples, coffee, and a ledger pencil he could have bought anywhere else in town. Every time he stayed longer than the purchase required. He asked about frost lines, rootstock, ditch water, crews who worked clean and crews who left a job half right in ways that got expensive later. Nora answered because she knew the answers. The town watched because the town thought it knew a different one. By mid-May, Juniper Crossing had built an entire romance out of glances Gideon never actually gave. He was solid. He was buying land to stay. Cora Bellamy was the prettiest young woman in 3 counties. The conclusion made itself. Nora heard it in the way conversations softened when she entered a room, in how Mrs. Pritchard said, "Your sister must be very pleased," then suddenly found a basket of onions fascinating, in the grin the feed mill men wore whenever Gideon's horse was tied outside on a Tuesday morning. What Nora did not say was that Gideon spent 40 minutes one afternoon arguing amiably with her about ditch gates, while Cora sat on the front step shelling peas where anybody with eyes could see her. What Nora did not say was that when he spoke to Cora, he was courteous. When he spoke to Nora, he listened. The turn came quietly. He asked what had become of the old Bellamy orchard on the north rise above town. The question sounded practical. The answer did not stay that way. "Leased," Nora said. "Mostly for hay now. We lost too many seasons after my father got hurt. We kept the store because it paid faster." "You wanted the orchard?" he asked. She should have given him a safer answer. Instead, she said, "I wanted what it might have been, if nobody had been forced to start choosing what to save." Gideon rested one hand on the counter. "I know that feeling," he said, quieter now. "Working toward a life, and then finding out life had other plans." There was history in that line. He did not explain it. She did not ask. But after he left, the numbers in front of Nora blurred long enough for her to lose count. Spring moved through the valley in stages, creek water loosening, plum trees leafing out. Then, all at once, the orchards turning white and pink under a sky still cold enough to lie. And every Tuesday, almost without fail, Gideon Hart found a reason to come in. A man planting a new orchard needed supplies. Nora knew that much. He did not, however, need that much coffee, or that many questions about historic frost pockets, or half an hour of conversation about which slope dried first after hard rain. The ledger did not lie. Neither did habit. Cora noticed before anyone said it plainly. "He is here every Tuesday," she said one evening while snapping beans at the kitchen table. "He is setting a lot of posts," Nora said. "He spent 20 minutes asking you whether west-facing rows color better in a cooler September." "He values a second opinion," Cora laid down the beans. "Nora." "What?" "You always do this." "Do what?" "Pretend clarity is arrogance." Nora had no answer for that. That night, lying awake, she finally let herself ask the dangerous question she had been dodging for weeks. What if the town had been wrong? The answer arrived the next Tuesday before the store had fully opened. Gideon stepped inside with his hat in his hands. Nora noticed that first because she had never seen him uncertain. "You're early," she said. "So are my nerves." That got her full attention. He stood at the counter for a moment, then said, "There's a lantern supper at the packing shed on Saturday. Music after. Half the valley will be there pretending not to notice who came with whom." Nora waited. "I'd like to go with you." The store went very still. Outside, a wagon rattled past over the ruts in Depot Road. Somewhere, farther off, a dog barked. The ordinary world continued with unbelievable disrespect. "With me," Nora repeated. "With you," Gideon said. No confusion, no hesitation. She told him she would think about it. He bought 2 pounds of coffee he had not come in for, and left. Nora thought about it for less than an hour before admitting the answer had been yes the moment he asked. What she had not accounted for was Cora's face when she said so. Her sister did not cry. She did not accuse. In some ways that would have been easier. Instead, Cora went still. "He asked you." "Yes." A pause. "I see." "Cora, no, it's all right. Truly, I'm glad." But Nora knew the difference between kindness and ease. That smile was the first one, not the second. The lantern supper at the packing shed was one of those valley events people called informal while planning them for weeks. Pies lined the back table in competitive rows. Men leaned against posts waiting for music to force them into visible feelings. Children ran exactly where adults least wanted them. When Nora arrived beside Gideon, the room recalibrated. Not dramatically. Juniper Crossing was too polite for that. But heads turned. Conversations bent. Two women near the cider barrel stopped mid-sentence. Mr. Pritchard, who had spent a month telling people Gideon Hart had good sense, looked briefly as though he had misplaced it himself. Nora knew how to carry her face through scrutiny. What unsettled her was not the staring. It was Gideon's steadiness. He did not drift away to easier company, to manage the room alone. He stayed exactly where he had chosen to be, as if standing beside Cora Bellamy in full view of the valley required no explanation beyond the one he had already made. They danced once, late, after the lamps burned lower and most of the room had thinned out. Gideon was not showy. He was certain. That, Nora discovered, was better. "You're quiet," he said. "I'm nearly always quiet. Not like this." She looked at the rough planks beneath their feet. "I keep waiting for the part where this makes sense." "What part?" "I'm not Cora." He did not flinch. He did not pity her. Thank God. "I know," he said. "That is the whole point." He held her gaze. "I know exactly who you are, Nora. You are the woman who has this valley mapped in her head. You are the one people depend on after they've made a mess of things. You are the one who never says the clever thing first because you're too busy saying the useful one. If I wanted ease, there are easier women to impress. That is not what I want." Nora did not cry, but something inside her, something that had been braced shut for years, stepped aside. The ride home was quiet in the good way, the way silence becomes after two people have finally said the important thing. Gideon walked her to the side porch and wished her good night without reaching for more than she had offered. Inside, a strip of lamplight showed under Cora's bedroom door. Nora stood in the hall with one hand against the wall, feeling the full shape of what had changed. Not only the warmth of being wanted, also the ache of knowing she had not been the only one hoping. She almost knocked. She didn't. Summer tightened over Juniper Crossing. Dust on the road by noon. Orchard crews starting before sunrise. The store smelling of burlap, spice, and hot pine boards. What settled most heavily over the Bellamy house was not anger, but care. Cora remained kind. She helped more. She asked after Nora's day. She remembered Gideon's coffee grind without being asked. She did everything a loving sister would do. And because she did it all so gracefully, the absence of ease felt louder. One evening, Nora found her on the back steps watching the last light fade over the dry kitchen garden. She sat beside her without invitation, the old habit between them. For a while, they listened to the ditch water move beyond the fence. Then Nora said, "I don't want this to cost you more than it has." Cora drew one knee up. "It is already costing me something," she said. "That doesn't make it wrong." Nora waited. "I thought I knew how this kind of story went," Cora said. "What kind of story?" "The kind where the pretty sister gets noticed first." A small breath of laughter. "And if she doesn't, the practical sister pretends she never noticed she was in the story at all." That landed cleanly because it was true. Nora had spent years stepping back before anyone asked her to. She had called it temperament, because that sounded better than fear. "I nearly did," she said. "I know." No triumph in Cora's voice, just honesty. Nora looked at her sister in the fading light and felt love with all its inconvenient edges. "You will be loved well," Nora said. This time, Cora's smile came without delay. "I intend to be." The first laugh between them after that sounded fragile. The second sounded earned. Something in Nora loosened after that conversation. Gideon saw it before she did. She disagreed more openly. She laughed faster. She stopped apologizing before offering an opinion. He seemed to enjoy every inch of the change. He had not come to Juniper Crossing for romance. He had come because the orchard belt north of the river was still affordable, and because there are men who reach a certain point in life and decide that if they are going to begin again, they would rather do it with trees than with noise. He had not expected Nora Bellamy. He had not expected ink on her fingers, weather in her judgment, or the steadiness of a woman who had learned to carry 3 lives' worth of unfinished work without asking for applause. By late August, he knew he was done leaving her to chance. He asked Thomas Bellamy for permission on a Tuesday afternoon while Nora was in the storeroom counting invoices. Thomas received him in the front parlor with a cane beside his chair and the alert expression of a man whose injury had reduced his movement, not his discernment. He asked Gideon only 3 questions. Can you provide for her without asking her to become smaller? Will you hear her when she is right? Do you understand that she has spent years holding up what other people leaned on? Gideon answered all 3 without trimming the truth. Thomas sat with that for a moment, then said, "She will argue with you." "I'm hoping for it." That earned the ghost of a smile. Nora knew none of this when Gideon came into the store on the first Saturday of September, while the afternoon heat still pressed against the windows. She was bent over the counter, sleeves rolled, reconciling harvest crate orders, hair escaping at the temples, entirely absorbed. He waited until she looked up. Then he set a plain gold ring on top of the open ledger. Not velvet, not theatrics, just gold against numbers. "I had a better speech prepared in my head," he said. "It disappeared the moment I saw you working." That alone nearly undid her. So he gave her the truth instead. "I want to build the rest of my life with you, not because no one else would do, because no one else is who I want beside me when the weather turns, when the books don't balance, when the trees bear heavy, when they don't, when life is ordinary, and when it is not. I want you in all of it." Juniper Crossing went right on existing beyond the window. A freight wagon rolled by. Somebody shouted across the street, showed astonishing indifference to the fact that Nora Bellamy's life had just divided into before and after. She looked at the ring. She looked at him. Then she asked, because precision had always been her language, "Are you quite certain?" His face warmed clear through. "Entirely." She laughed once, the sound shaken loose by relief, disbelief, and happiness arriving all at once. "Yes," she said. "All right. Yes." He came around the counter slowly, touched her face first, then kissed her with the kind of certainty that never needs drama to feel final. Cora was the first person Nora told. She found her in the pantry measuring flour. One look at Nora's face, and Cora set down the scoop. "He asked." Nora held out her hand. Cora looked at the ring, then at her sister, and all the weather of the summer moved across her face in one honest wave. Then she stepped forward and folded Nora into her arms. "He is a good man," Cora said. "I know. So are you." That was not the assignment. A soft laugh through tears. "It is still true." They married in October, after the first hard, cool night and before the valley lost all its leaves. The church on Willow Street was full enough that latecomers had to stand. Nora wore her mother's altered dress and no bouquet because she disliked carrying decorative burdens. Gideon looked at her the entire way down the aisle with the same unwavering attention he had worn across the store counter the first day she warned him about frost. Juniper Crossing adjusted, as towns eventually do when reality refuses to ask permission from expectation. The Hart Orchard east of Miller Creek became known for 2 things, careful fruit and careful management. Gideon knew trees. Nora knew everything else and half the trees besides. Decisions were discussed, argued, revised, and usually improved by the fact that neither of them had married for ornament. Cora took over Bellamy Mercantile in time and ran it with a warmth Nora never had, and instincts Nora had always respected. 2 autumns later, she married a traveling schoolmaster who came for 1 winter contract and stayed because leaving stopped making sense. Nora never stopped keeping ledgers, she just had more worth counting. And years later, on Tuesday mornings in late summer, Gideon would sometimes come in from the orchard and find her at the kitchen table with account books open, sunlight across the page, pencil behind one ear, exactly as it had been that first morning in the store. He would set a cup of coffee beside her without interrupting. She would glance up, lightly smile, and go back to the numbers. It was not a grand life by the standards of people who mistake noise for importance. It was better than grand. It was chosen, built, and fully inhabited, and that is rarer than most people ever understand.